Thank you for joining us for the January edition of 3Squares. We made it through the new year and we're headed into 2025. And we're going to spend a little time today talking about our predictions. So we'll be looking into our crystal balls and reading our palms and deciding exactly what's going to happen in the world in 2025. And it's worth exactly what you paid for it. But we do have some insight. We hope you will enjoy joining us. My co-hosts, Kevin Ryan and Susan Schwally.
Hello, hello. Susan Schwally. I'm with QualSights. I lead the sensors business. And what does that mean? It's all about changing traditional research to understand consumer behavior and usage patterns in new and transformative ways.
Cool.
And I'm Kevin Ryan with Malachite Strategy and Research, helping consumer packaged good companies, food service, and ingredient companies at the front end of innovation and strategy.
Excellent. We didn't draw straws to decide who was going to go first. So
Yeah.
who would like to kick us off? I think Kevin should go last because he's going to be the best.
I don't care either way.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, definitely.
Why don't
Definitely.
I tee up my broad thing? Because I think all of your stuff falls underneath it.
Cool.
Probably. Yep.
Okay. So, we're obviously in a very chaotic time. And I think that we're going to see the return of some trends, and we're going to see a lot of new things as consumers, companies try to figure out how to navigate it. So I'll just give a couple quick examples and you guys can riff off of it. I know we'll talk about health and wellness. It's not just about Ozempic, which is a disruptor, but I think it's going to be increased personalization. Charlie, I know you'll have a thought about consumer trust and who do they go to for information. We're going to have apps that enable this, not just information. I think that's going to continue to splinter. The consumer is still going to be dealing with 25% increased pricing. I think private label will continue. I think there's some other things that could really keep pressure on pricing. Climate change affecting supply chain, immigration, could affect also supply chain and labor. And then lastly, big food. We see it already with them making acquisitions to try and optimize that product mix, that profitability of their profit mix. I think, Kevin, you'll speak to innovation still being down, so we're doing it through acquisition. And then continue to navigate. Again, Charlie on trust. Folks walking away from DEI, staying with DEI, sustainability. There's some changes coming, from the administration about supporting that and incenting that in different ways. Companies are going to have to take a stand on where they're with that. And then again, big food has maxed out its pricing power, so it's got to happen in other ways. So yeah, I think it's a lot of swirl. I'll mention one last thing. I'm going to be very curious to see if consumers are going to double down more on like self-care and comfort. Remember during COVID, we saw a lot of the Huga, the home. We invested in our homes tremendously. I think people are going to be feeling that more than ever, but are they going to be willing to do it all in home? And I think it's an opportunity for food service if they can do it well. So that's just one like side thing out there. So I'm going to step back now. I just dropped a whole bunch of stuff and, there, I set the table for the squares. Go for it.
That's a lot. So let's kind of dive into that and unpack it a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about the trust piece and the consumer confusion to which you alluded, Susan, and then Kevin, you can dive in here. We just wrapped up a piece of research that we'll continue to share more broadly in 2025. But it's fascinating because consumers are increasingly conflicted about who they should trust and where they should go for information because we have an infinite proliferation of sources. And so they're getting bombarded with information and they aren't sure exactly who is providing credible information and who they should trust when it comes to information. Increasingly less reliant on science and more just people like me. And because they're confused, they're reverting to personal experience. Which can be good and bad, but it challenges us when we think about trying to deal with complex issues that we really need to be able to discern what constitutes a fact, what constitutes science. I know we're going to get into the whole conversation about processed foods and ultra-processed foods, but there's a lot of confusion and people are unclear about who they should trust. And I think that's only going to become a larger challenge for us in 2025 and beyond. Because of the proliferation of channels and the proliferation of people who are claiming to be expert.
You know, so one very specific prediction, and I'll put myself out on the line about, a very specific prediction would be, I think you're going to see more food companies step up to the plate in how they label for food safety.
Hmm.
And the reason I say that is you see it now, baby food now has to list lead, cadmium, other heavy metals. With the amount of recalls that we've seen, and then with a lot of the current administration stepping back in the sense from other government agency, the idea of pulling back, someone has to fill that void in the sense of to help consumers feel comfortable with the food that they're eating. I think that companies are going to step into that gap and start saying, we're going to provide you with that safety, sense of safety. So here's the heavy metal content. Here's the spec basically of that product. I think you're going to see more of that, probably starting at the age aspect from an infant sense all the way up to children, and then potentially maybe even this year into more adults, probably more health and wellness products.
That's fascinating because our research has also shown, and some other research we've done, is a complete collapse in trust in regulatory agencies.
Yeah.
And it's on both ends of the spectrum, right? It would be
Yep.
people that you would think historically would be trusting and people you would think would not be trusting, but it's collapsed. So your point is well taken, Kevin. I think if people are going to be looking for those sources, it's a gap that companies may lean into to say, you can trust us because we'll be more transparent. We'll share the information. We'll answer your questions. And the question always becomes, does that trigger litigation?
Right. I mean, and it's actually really, it's going back in time. That's how brands first started. Brands were when Underwood first started the first brand and said, we make the best deviled ham or whatever, or Quaker said, we make the safest oats. It really was, we are safe and you can count on our brand to be safe and made in a particular way. We're just going to go back to that aspect that it stands for safety and wellness, wholeness, realness.
Yeah, but the whole idea that a potted meat company was the
I know,
the
was one of the
leader
first
here,
brands. I know.
that's troubling. That's troubling.
Susan?
I'm not questioning your prediction. One of the things that we heard at CFI's last conference on trust is that consumers are really going to the internet and influencers over manufacturer sites. So I do think there's a huge role for them to play, and they will try to play it. I think what'll be interesting to see is if it resonates.
Yeah. I think it's different with trust in some aspects of it, but trust about lead content is hard to do without a
Fair.
test
Yeah,
or something.
absolutely.
You know what I mean? And I think that when you've seen in the last, an industry takes a while to catch up, right? So all the recalls we had on applesauce and then on cinnamon itself and all that kind of stuff, that is reverberating through the food system. And you're starting to see how are we going to be that? So, it's a prediction.
I think to Susan's point, though, I think it's interesting because I spent part of last week with the 30 most influential dietitians in the U.S., and they are clearly focused on being science-based and delivering facts, but they were also challenged by and continue to lament the dietitians that are simply there to promote their particular practice or their particular personal brand,
Yeah.
and happy to jump on whatever the most popular trend or bandwagon happens to be,
Right.
whether there's any scientific foundation for it whatsoever.
Interesting. Dietitian as influencer. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. Okay. That was mine.
That was yours, or is that just your response to Susan's?
That was response. I mean, that was my prediction. I'm saying that was my prediction. So, all right. Do you want me to go back around the horn? I got another one if you want to.
Well, let me jump in. So I've got one that we can talk about, and I think it ties back into this, and it is the challenge with the proliferation of misinformation and how that's going to be exploited by various sectors in the food system, and then the asynchronous regulation that we're going to see as a result of that just throws sand in the gears of the entire food system, right? So on January 3rd, Governor Newsom in California issued several executive orders. One of them was related specifically to ultra-processed food and other food dyes. But the exact order was to recommend actions to reduce the purchase of soda, candy, and other, quote, ultra-processed foods and or foods with synthetic dye or other additives. And, we've talked before, and we've got others with whom we engage where there's so much confusion about what constitutes an ultra processed food.
Yeah.
Some of the earlier research we did, consumers don't have an understanding, but the belief is if processed is bad, ultra processed must be really bad,
Yeah.
right? So it's like fructose and then high fructose, it must be even worse. And so there's no understanding, and the lack of a clear definition, as we were talking about earlier, where hummus and bread clearly would qualify under the NOVA definition, everybody kind of agrees that a diet based in Twinkies and chips is probably not a healthy diet. But the definition is so broad and so
Hmm.
poor that it lumps in all kinds of food that most of us would not think of in terms of not contributing to a healthy eating pattern.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue to see challenges there. And then if you're a food manufacturer, what in the world do you do? Right? Because California, I think, would be the sixth largest economy in the world and certainly one of the largest in the US. And so do you simply formulate to meet that expectation and that regulation, increasing costs then for everyone else? Because you're probably not going to have a different formulation for Indiana than you are for California. And so it just creates all kinds of challenges when you think about food manufacturing, food distribution, even food labeling, to your point, Kevin, in terms of what has to be included and not included, depending upon where you're manufacturing and what your markets happen to be.
Yep.
So, Kevin, can I ask you a question on this? Because,
Yeah.
some people are viewing it that it's really about the basics of the food, like the fat, the sugar content, carbs, etc. But there is a component of this that's about ingredients and additives. And some of these things are popping up again where people are consumed about it, concerned about it. It seems to me like, are we going to go through another round of clean label? Are we going to end up with all kinds of different new claims? It seems to me like we're going to go into another level of that kind of introspection.
I think from a consumer point of view, yes, but from a technical point of view, probably not. To Charlie's point, I don't think that the definition is not solid enough, which gives the whole thing a disservice. It does a whole disservice to the whole thing. From a consumer point of view, potentially, the idea of reclassifying foods again by processed, ultra processed, however it may be, I haven't seen that come to life because I think for the majority of consumers, that technical aspect of it, or even that kind of parsing it, is not there. But you'll see something pop up, I'm sure, within them, but not from a
Yeah.
technical aspect because
Am I going to
it's just
see
it's
like
too vague.
no xanthan gum?
I
Am I
think
going to
yes,
start seeing
yeah,
stuff like that?
I think you'll start to see, but I haven't seen. I mean, there are some. Some key ingredients. Like for a while, carrageenan was a big thing. It just whatever, to Charlie's point about influencers, whatever the influencers get on. I think the next big one is probably seed oils. And that you're already seeing products out there that are there's the No Seed Oil Alliance that certifies your product as no seed oils, even though there's very little evidence to show that seed oils is negative compared to a lot of animal fat. So I think you'll probably see a couple pop. Yeah.
Well, in red dye number three, I mean, if you look at the FDA's ruling, they acknowledge that their decision to ban it is not science-based,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's in response to other constituents. And the Delaney Clause, which essentially says any ingredient that could cause cancer in animals or humans has to be banned.
Yeah.
So if you start down that path, I mean, you could essentially take everything on the back of a can or a package and go in the right dosage,
Right.
right?
Yeah. I
And
mean, Red
so this
40
is a
is
very slippery.
just
Oh,
as
right.
bad.
Yeah, right. So this is a very, very slippery slope that we find ourselves on. I've got one more that I'd love the feedback from the two of you on. And again, going back to the dietitian event that I attended, there was a lot of focus on plant-forward diets, which is not vegetarian, it's not vegan.
Yep.
It is leading with plants. And there was a great case study of a project in New York City where they have plant-forward diets now in every New York City institution, be they hospitals or nursing homes or jails, whatever it happens to be. And they've seen tremendous success because they aren't promoting it as plant-forward. Right. It is the chef special. And they've discovered, and there was some other research presented, that if you label it as vegetarian or low salt or low fat, people are like, thank you, but no. I want flavor in my food. I want something that tastes like my food. And they've created recipes that are relevant and appealing to the incredibly diverse and large number of cultures across New York City. And it was just a really interesting case study and very similar at Google, as the person there in charge of food choice architecture talked about what they're doing to continue to promote plant forward options and with significant uptake. So it's really interesting to see that approach as opposed to vegetarian or vegan. But what can we do to promote something that's plant forward, that checks a couple of boxes for perceived better for me and better for the planet? So love your perspective or feedback on that or anything else that you might have seen.
Yeah. The idea has been around for a bit. I think it's just gotten better marketing. So the idea has been around, the idea of, the whole idea of my plate.
Yeah, yeah.
But the idea of, let's fill the one section of my plate a little bit more, have another helping of the vegetable part. That part has been around, but I think the plant forward language and the idea that let's just kind of increase the amount of plant parts in your diet versus the meat part, I think that's newer marketing, and I do think that is increasing. I agree with the dietitians that is
Yeah, it
coming.
was fascinating because what they did in the hospital system was the chef's special every day was a plant forward entree.
Hmm.
Now you could go down the list and still get your other
Yeah,
animal-based proteins,
right.
but it wasn't like here's our plant forward offering. It was like here's today's chef's special.
Yeah.
And the uptake on that, again, to your point, Kevin, in terms of marketing and also just creating flavors and menus that appealed to a broad range of tastes. I just found it really, really interesting.
I think it's really smart because I mean, it's no, what was it, Jessica Seinfeld, who wrote a cookbook on how to
Hmm.
hide things
Yeah.
in your kids'
Sneaky
foods
chef,
that you want
something
them
like
to
that. Yeah.
eat. Yeah, yeah. And if they don't know and you don't draw attention to it and it still tastes good, they'll accept it because a lot of this
Hmm.
is mental. It's mental wrangling. By the way, isn't this just flexitarian? Isn't this just another? I don't know. I could be wrong.
I don't know that it's flexitarian from yes, in one sense it is, Susan, but I think this is a very intentional effort to lead with plants as opposed to saying eat everything. So it's a
Interesting.
slightly different approach on it. But Kevin, to your point about the recircling, I mean, the dietitians, one of the few things they could all agree on is everybody needs to eat more fruits and vegetables.
Hmm.
Right. That's the one thing everybody could agree on, regardless of their particular perspective or specialty.
Right. Well, plus the idea of eating more is never going to be negatively. So it's the same thing with, that's why protein popped so much,
Right.
because it was the only macronutrient where people were told to eat more of was a good thing. Everything else was you got to cut down, and no one wants to cut down. So if it means eating more, deep fried Brussels sprouts, that sounds delicious. Even,
Yep.
and that constitutes more vegetables on my plate. So I think there's some positive there.
I wanted to ask you something rather specific in this space, and we don't have to dwell on it too long, but I'm reading a lot more about anti-inflammatory diets. Now, it's been around a while in terms of turmeric, and the golden paste is, one
Hmm.
thing I can think of. It's
Yeah.
clearly related to sugar, but I feel like it's hitting more critical mass, and I'm just curious if you're perceiving that and what the impact on that might be. I think it does play into this whole thing of more plant for diet for sure, but just curious what you think.
I mean, yeah, to your point, I've been seeing it for a long time. I think it's going to continue probably this year for the next whatever years, bubbling in the background. I don't think it's a primary benefit that I think is going to pop, and the reason is because it's such a soft benefit, but it
Right.
is a good secondary benefit. It's like antioxidants were back in the 90s and early 2000s. It's the same thing. It's like, well, this happens to have anti-inflammatory benefits. Like, oh, that's great. You know what I mean? But from a macronutrient, I think that's probably going to stick. It's high protein, anti-inflammatory. That's a great win. But leading with something that actually has a satiety benefit or something like that, I think is going to continue. But yeah, I do think anti-inflammatory is definitely rising in consumer minds.
One of the things that's always important for us to remember as people who spend their lives in food and agriculture is not most people don't, right? I mean, 43% of the population in our most recent research were identified as comfort seekers,
Yeah.
who are simply looking for somebody to give them permission that the decisions they're making around food are the right decisions.
Right.
They're overwhelmed with the amount of information. They don't know how to reconcile conflicting claims. They don't want to spend a lot of time on this. They want somebody to give them some very clear guidance that's easy to follow. And I think that's really, really important as we think about all of these different issues and the particular nuances of them. That may be something that is less relevant to a majority of people who are actually making food decisions, be it at a restaurant or a grocery store.
Yeah. Yeah, because to me, it will be similar to antioxidants in the sense of it just sounds good. Again, going back to marketing, it sounds good. It's like, oh, I got my antioxidants in, but it also is a good justification for drinking wine, having some blueberries that I already like, having dark chocolate. It's the same type of thing. I think it will. Anti-inflammatory will probably be similar in that type of justification.
And then throw booze in there, though, and the headwinds that alcohol has faced.
You had me at
right?
drinking wine, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I mean,
I know, me too.
The headwinds, the headwinds for alcohol are significant.
But we're the ones propping it up, right?
Yes.
I mean, this is a huge we could do a whole show on generational shifts. Yeah.
So going through the duty-free shop in one of the international airports, it was fascinating to me to see the zero alcohol that was being sold at like zero alcohol Tanqueray gin.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just, I know. It stunned me, right? And I was tempted to buy some, but I had no way to. I'm not buying 750 milliliters of anything on the road. So.
That's what surprises me is usually, I think when you see the non-alcoholic or like the mocktails, it's couched in a flavor that isn't the alcohol itself. That's fascinating on the Tanqueray.
Well, the gin, it would be just juniper berry.
Yeah, because it's just it's the same kind of
okay.
Botanicals. Yeah. It's botanicals in some kind of liquid.
If it was zero alcohol vodka, then I would have a question about it. I'd be like, so
potatoes.
It's water. It's water.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's water with bite. Yeah, exactly.
But we can drink more Guinness.
Because
Guinness is on the rise. You know that?
I did see that. Yeah, it's becoming quite popular. Yeah,
because they gamified it.
Yeah.
Oh, very smart.
You have to chug it until you get the line between the foam and the beer on the G on the glass. I think we should do this when we get together.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of which, we're going to promote this and then we'll jump over to the quiz. For the very first time, the 3Squares will be physically together. And we started having these conversations in 2020.
Yeah.
Right. So in March, it's going to be 5 years that we've been having these kinds of conversations. And the three of us have never been in the same place at the same time. Oh. So that's going to happen. We're going to have a live 3Squares. The evening, it'll be, early evening California time, later evening, depending upon your time zone. So we'll hope you to join. You'll have more information coming, but it's going to be a live 3Squares on March the 12th. So mark your calendars, the first time we've all been together. And we'll actually have a live quiz with people as well, which will be great fun.
There may be like a cataclysmic event of some sort with
we're all
three
together.
of us coming together.
Who knows? Maybe that will trigger the big one in California. Could happen.
Let's hope not.
Let's hope not. All right. Enough of this foolishness. Let's transition to the quiz. Speaking of foolishness, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so I was thinking about what's going on right now, and I thought New Year's, and I thought New Year's babies. So I thought, okay, let's talk about things that have to do with babies and kids when it comes to food. So everything is centered on baby and kids food. All right. So first question: Gerber has been extremely successful selling food and formula for infants. Beyond baby food, which of the following has Gerber not attempted to sell? Which of these have they not attempted to sell? A, life insurance. B, children's bedtime books. C, food for single adults. And D, baby clothing.
Single adults.
Okay. Susan?
It's either that or the clothing. It's one of those two. Susan, you're muted, my friend.
I'm gonna say clothing because Charlie, you took mine.
Okay, you're both incorrect. They do currently have clothing, I believe, or at least they have in the past. They have had clothing. And food for single adults was an attempt. They had a product where they were trying to sell for back in the 70s and early 80s. They had a product that was just sold. It was a pureed food for. It was kind of its soylent of its day.
Bigger jars.
It was
mush?
Bigger jars of it was, and you should look it up online and see it because
Were the flavors better?
It can't be as bad as a Colgate lasagna. That has
but it was pretty close. It was like pureed carrots for singles. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Oh,
so literature is the question. Children's bedtime books. They've never sold
Really?
bedtime books. Yeah, no, it's never been a thing. I think there may
That's a
have been.
natural line extension, a
It
partnership with Golden
is.
Books or somebody.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
There may have been a cross thing, but they themselves have never marketed it specifically as Gerber. So,
interesting.
yeah. All right. Number two, Lunchables, the popular kid snack meal, was originally invented in 1988 to do what? Why was it originally invented? Was it A, to get Oscar Mayer into the school lunch program? Was it B, to develop a product that looked like airplane meal for kids after a marketer noticed that their child was entranced by the offering of a meal on a plane? Was it C, to help the company sell more bologna? Or was it D, Oscar Mayer had a deal with a deli meal partner, their deli meal partner, to sell more offcuts of certain meat and cheese pieces left over after cutting deli meat?
They all sound very plausible.
That's the point.
I know, I know. It's so. I'm gonna go with the it's either school lunch or the offcuts. I'm gonna go with. I don't think it'd be school lunch. I'm gonna go with the offcuts.
Okay, so they were okay. Susan,
Muted again, my friend.
you did.
Okay. I know how to work my computer. I'm going with school.
School lunch. No, you were incorrect. It really was just to help the company sell more bologna.
Oh
It
man,
really was. They were trying to sell, they were seeing a decline in bologna sales, and they found that, plus the insight that the barrier for moms putting bologna into the lunchbox was time and prepping the sandwich. So they said, hey, how can we get bologna pre-prepped for the lunchbox?
I don't think it was always for
Lunchables.
kids, was it? Because I know when I lived in a very small rural area, I mean, Lunchables became my lunch pretty much every day.
I think that was, it started as a kid thing, and then Charlie started eating it.
I think you're the only. I think that's a sample of one.
Right.
I don't
Probably an
think
N of
so.
one.
Yeah.
could
Yeah,
be,
it's an N
could
of
be.
one.
All right. Have you considered Gerber single for single adults?
I mean, the whole idea that we're just going to put it in a bigger package and see if grown-ups want to buy
I'm
it
going to
is
send you a
just so
picture. I'm going to
goofy.
send you a picture. All right. Number
Ugh.
3. Why are popsicles called popsicles? Was it A, the creator's kids urged him to name them Pops Icicles or Popsicles? Is it B, they are named after the bright and vibrant colors similar to pop art? Is it C, they were originally called portable icicles, but shortened to popsicles? Or D, the technical name for the freezing process and molding process is called pop freezing, hence popsicles.
He skunked us so far, Susan.
I know. Okay, I'm going to go with portable ices because some
Okay.
of these companies started out with just like really like functional names. So I'm going there.
What was A again?
A was the creator's kids urged him to name them Pops Icicles.
I'm going to go with that. I don't have a better option.
You are correct, Charlie. Yes. Frank Frank Epperson invented popsicles when he was 11 years old. And for
Get
years, they were
out.
called Epsicles. They were called Epsicles by him and his
Oh,
family.
that's not good.
That sounds like a medical condition.
I know. And then his kids begged him to change the names to Pops Icicles or Popsicles. And that's where we get popsicles from, is that up until then it was called Epsicles. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Charlie.
Eli Lilly is working on a cure for epsicles now, I believe. So
All right, Charlie, you're up. All right. Number 4, Sour Patch Kids were invented in the 1970s by a Canadian confectionery company called Jarrett International. In Canada, they were originally called what? A, Tangy Tykes, B, Sniblets, C, Marsmen, or D, Sour Buddies?
I
Go
know
ahead,
which one
Susan.
I want to say, but I'm not. So I'm going to go with the last one.
Sour Buddies.
Sour buddies.
All
Okay.
right, then I'm going to go with Tangy
Canadians are
Tykes.
friendly.
I'm going to go with Tangy Tykes. Easy for me to say.
You are both incorrect. It was Marsmen. They were originally called
Marsmen.
Marsmen, but when the brand tried to sell in the US, they were told that that name might not work out very well. And instead, they should try to do something that's similar to a very popular toy at the time called Cabbage Patch
Cabbage
Kids.
Patch Kids, yeah.
And so they named them Sour Patch Kids.
And nobody thought about making a candy out of cabbage.
No.
Huh.
That's
Not
that's
yet.
an untapped opportunity.
Maybe
Charlie.
Gerber can try that next.
Exactly. All right.
Kevin, how did you come up with sniblets?
Sniblets. I was thinking of the old HBO show. Do you remember the old HBO show when Sniglets? The old HBO show, what was it called? I forget what it was called, but he used to have there was a section on the show, not necessarily the news, I think it was called. And he had a section on there. It was like names for strange things that you didn't know. And it was called Sniglets. He actually had a whole line of like words that you didn't know. And that's what I was thinking. I know, asking me how I come up with stuff is not a good idea.
We could just have a podcast on your brain.
Yeah, that was
All right,
interesting.
number 5. In 1962, Pepperidge Farm started selling goldfish crackers. Why were they shaped like goldfish? Is it A, they were designed to help calm children, and the thought of an aquarium with fish was seen as a calming idea? Was it B, they were based off a common Japanese cake called taiyaki that represents good luck? Is it C, Pepperidge Farm's founder, Margaret Rudkin, picked up the molds for the crackers inexpensively from a defunct cat food company? Or was it D, they were inspired by a Swiss cracker maker who made them for a birthday present for his wife, who happened to be a Pisces?
I'm pretty sure it's not the cat food mold.
I'm going to go with that one. I'm going to go with the cheap mold just because it is so weird.
I'm gonna go with the familial thing that someone Swedish thing made it for someone and it was a great idea.
Say, which one is that then?
The
The
last
last one.
The last one.
someone yeah.
Yes, you are correct, Susan. That is the correct answer. It was Margaret Rudkin, the founder of Pepperidge Farm, saw it in Switzerland, inspired by the cracker maker, and that's where he got the idea. It was a birthday present to his wife, who happened to be a Pisces. So I believe we are tied.
I still like goldfish. I know that a lot of people give them for kids. I like them, and I like the
They have a
pretzel
huge
ones.
adult following. Guys, I used
Really?
to work on this business a lot. If I didn't get this answer right, it was going to be a problem.
Yeah, no, I like them. I think they're great.
That was all the flavor extensions that were more adult and hot and spicy. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it all
I'm
started
still-
with
I still like the regular
birthday
ones.
present.
It's just let's just keep it simple.
a
goldfish.
good answer though would have been that it came from a cat food mold.
I
I'm
thought
sorry
that
to
was
say, I like them
fun.
too, but
That
I
was
thought that would have been
brilliant.
fun.
Yeah, that would
That
have
would have
Again,
been
how do you
brilliant.
think of these things? The answers
thought
that
who
aren't
else-
correct are almost better.
I thought, who else would come up with a goldfish? I thought, well, you see them in cat food, so I thought that'd be interesting.
There you go.
No offense to our goldfish friends. So
That's right.
So are we
All right.
tied, Charlie?
You were tied.
Or is this the last one too?
That was
probably,
it.
right?
That was it.
That was
We were
it?
tied.
We're
That
done.
was
That was it. There was 5. You were
That's
tied.
We're tied.
I know.
I'm going to take it as a
There's no
victory
overtime or
because-
sudden death.
No,
or-
I didn't have a sudden
no
death.
sudden death.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Well, good. Well, you've heard the tremendous insight, the incredible thoughts of the 3Squares about what might happen in 2025. So we hope you found that engaging and it stimulates some additional thinking for you. In the meantime, join us on our next episode. It will be February. Is it February? How do you pronounce it?
February. I don't
February.
pronounce the R.
I don't either. It's
it's
just
a
February.
silent R.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
silent R. Okay. So we'll have another one in February. And then in March, we will be live coming to you from Irvine, California, assuming that everything is still there at that point in time. So thanks again for joining us for another episode of 3Squares. We will see you again in February. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.